Every man I've ever loved has been quietly afraid of becoming useless. This fear of being irrelevant, of being discarded, often hides behind ambition and strength and product. But underneath, it's heartbreakingly human. And I think it's also what drives our obsession with immortality. Not immortality in the sci-fi sense. We're not looking for capes and endless youth. What we really want is to matter, to still be useful, to still be needed. And that's exactly what modern science is trying to promise. Engineering immortality, a promise of continued usefulness. We're currently engineering immortality through a patchwork of scientific advances, biomedical innovations, and digital experiments that seek to extend life, delay aging, and preserve identity. While we're not close to true immortality, we're inching closer to life extension, if not in years, then in utility. On a cellular or chemical level, we target aging itself. Senolytics, for example, selectively kill senescent or zombie cells to prevent aging-related diseases. Telomerase activation prevents the shortening of telomeres, which are these little caps on the ends of your chromosomes, which are key markers of cellular aging. Once these telomeres are sufficiently short, the cells undergo a pre-programmed cellular death, called apoptosis. Gene editing or CRISPR technologies, of course, can be used to correct mutations that cause premature aging, or edit genes like FOXO3 or P53, which are associated with aging. And then there's mimetics, like rapamycin, metformin, and resveratrol, which mimic the effects of calorie restriction, which has been linked to longer lifespans in animal models. At the cognitive or neurological level, we can look at things like brain-computer interfaces. The long-term goals of companies like Neuralink are generally along the lines of memory enhancement, but some even go so far as consciousness preservation, or a digital afterlife or resurrection. Then there are connectome projects, which are ideas surrounding the scanning and mapping of neural connections in the brain in the hopes of replicating people's minds. Cryonics famously is about freezing people's brains or bodies in the hopes that in the future, technologies will be developed to revive them. But my favorite projects, the ones that I think are most pragmatic and restorative, are the technologies developed at the physical level. Things like artificial hearts, synthetic blood, in vivo lung perfusion, and lab-grown organs all extend physical function. Even things like exoskeletons and neuroprosthetics are in the works, which would help people overcome spinal injuries and degeneration and frailty. All of these projects aim to prolong not just life, but functionality, which sounds fantastic in theory. Because I think deep down, we're not just afraid of dying, right? We're afraid of becoming dead weight. In engineering, there's a term for this. It's called planned obsolescence. We no longer engineer with the hopes that things will last forever. We plan for things to break, or at least we design them knowing that they will. There's this misconception that this means that things are poorly designed or poorly made, but this is actually a function of the device. We design things with a mean time to failure, meaning probabilistically, when is this thing likely to break down? It's strategic. It helps us predict when to maintain, replace, or upgrade certain components. This is a fundamental principle in forensic engineering and manufacturing, but we can apply it to the body as well, right? We know our bones weren't meant to last 90 years. As you age, your hormonal production slows down, which means metabolically you slow down, and then physically you slow down. So you're not using your bones the same way you once did, and you don't have the same building blocks that you once did either. And what biomechanics tells us about tissues like bone is that it's really a use it or lose it system, just like your muscles. If you're not putting your bones under the same stresses that you once did, you're going to lose bone density, which is correlated with things like tensile strength and flexibility. So things like hip joints will need some sort of compensatory mechanism, some sort of upgrading or replacement to maintain their desired functionality as you age. This logic all makes sense for things like machines and even certain systems within your body. But at some point along the way, we started applying this logic to the systems that are us. We've internalized this idea that we should be constantly maintaining or upgrading, and that when we can no longer produce or perform or protect, that we should be replaced. I don't want to risk being misconstrued here, so I'm going to try to explain what I mean. Let me extend a womanly olive branch and try to open up the conversation a little bit. I think we may equate breaking with weakness, right? Having a breakdown in front of someone else is so scary because it feels so vulnerable. I want to reframe this a bit. Breaking, especially in the planned sense, can mean a designed failure point. These are intentional places where the system will yield so the whole thing doesn't collapse. If your car battery is dying, maybe your headlights will start to dim. Maybe the lights on your dash will start flickering, right? These are engineered points of failure, so you know that you need to replace the battery before the whole thing shuts down and leaves you stranded on the highway. When failure is planned, when maintenance and repair are consistent, these systems aren't weak, they're not fragile, they're resilient. Let's pause here. Retirement sounds good in theory, but many people dread it. Many people return to work directly after retirement when this realization hits, not because they hate free time, but because they fear being taken out of commission. They fear purposelessness. I think men especially often tie their worth to their use, to being strong and capable and irreplaceable. When that's taken away by injury or aging or changing roles, it's not just an inconvenience, it's an identity collapse. When you're no longer the one that people lean on, when you're no longer needed, I don't think you necessarily fear death. I think you fear becoming unnecessary. So this is the debate. Do we design to last or to be loved? This is where the philosophies clash. One voice says, be efficient, be valuable, be indispensable, otherwise you're a drain. And then the other voice will say, you're not a tool. You're not here to serve endlessly. You're here to connect and be cared for, even when you can't give anything in return. We can either design ourselves like machines, optimized, replaceable, and judged by utility, or design our lives like ecosystems, interconnected and adaptive and nurturing, even in decline. I'm not trying to push a poetic excuse for underachieving or provide an emotional rationalization for failure. I know you're high achieving and ambitious, but really ask yourself, if someone you loved could no longer contribute, would you just immediately discard them? And if not, why do you apply that logic to yourself? So what if we design for graceful failure? So let's imagine another model, one that we build intentionally, a career that accounts for burnout, friendships that aren't based on usefulness, a body that's allowed to slow down, perhaps even a legacy that's not built on functionality or how useful you were or how irreplaceable you were, but by what you made possible. We don't just need new medicine or new technology. We need new metrics for what makes life valuable. Redundancy isn't inefficiency. It's love in system design. If you're bearing the weight of everything you hold dear alone, you are risking its fate on your ability to hold it forever. If you love the things you carry, you'll want to protect them, and that means planning for their safety. So maintenance isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Repairing your systems makes you more resilient to future stresses. It means you can weather the storms to come with more confidence. So failure isn't the end, it's part of the blueprint, and planning for that is responsible. So here's the tender truth. Let me say it plainly. I can't promise you permanence in the scientific or physical realm, and spiritually I have no idea what's going on. But I can promise you this, you are worth more than what you can do. You don't have to be immortal, you don't have to be productive, you don't even have to be strong, but you do need to be needed. Not forever, and not in a transactional way, but in a human way. So let's build systems that still value people after their peak. Let's stop worshiping efficiency at the cost of empathy. Let's make space for brokenness and quietness and rest, because every man I've ever loved has been quietly afraid of becoming useless. And I wish they knew that you were never loved because of your function. You were loved because you were you.